Hey everyone, this is Shane with Omni Technologies. Today we're going to be looking at Lenel OnGuard software, specifically at the alarm monitoring application. This is an application in the OnGuard suite that I would generally refer to as your real-time piece of software that allows you to interact with the hardware in real time in a way that you can see events, you can send commands. So for things like card readers, you can toggle the mode of operation. If you need to let someone in through a door, you can do that in real time as well. So it's a real handy piece of software that you can do a lot with. And I find that often customers are just barely scratching the surface of what they can do with this program. So what I'd like to do is just take a few minutes to kind of just go through the basics. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to get logged in first. I've already got the software open, so I'm going to click the login button, which normally happens as soon as you open the application. One of the unique things about alarm monitoring that you do not see with system administration is, unless you have this set as a default, which if you see these two checkboxes in front of you, you have a couple options to set one of these as default, but what we're looking at is to set a monitor zone. What is a monitor zone? Well, because we're dealing with events, it gives us the ability to route events in a certain way. If we only want to see certain types of events like alarms or access granted events, we can set up zones basically that would include certain controllers. Now this is not to be confused with segmentation. Segmentation allows you to assign user permission to specific things on a controller level. This is not the same. So this is more of a filtering sort of thing. If you don't want to see a particular panel, you could take that out of your zone, and that is done in system administration. And so I may cover that in another video. But for now, we're just going to go with the default zone, which is the one that's built in. If you don't want to have to select this every single time, you can check one of these to make that your default selection for either the monitoring station, which would be this workstation specifically, or your user assignment. And then click OK. And it will open up. I will say I've got one extra window here already because I've got some settings in place. This bottom one, the system status tree, I'm going to close that out. Because actually, if you're logging in for the first time, this is a little more like what you would see. You would just see what they call the main alarm monitor, which I would also just kind of casually refer to as your event viewer. All the things that happen in real time are going to show up here. And you can't actually get rid of this. If you try and X that window out, it's not going to go anywhere. So just kind of an overview. You've got your toolbar up on top, just kind of some of the different menus. You've got the shortcut bar up here, and if you hover over any of these, it's going to give you a description of what it is. If you interact with those regularly, you'll get to know what the icons are for. But yeah, the other window that I would highly recommend, that I kind of keep these two windows as part of my default layout, would be the system status tree. And you can open that up in a couple ways by going to the third shortcut button from the left, view system status. That's going to open up your system status tree. You can also do it from the toolbar menu if you go to the view menu and then go to system status up here towards the top. New system status window would do the same thing. You can have multiple instances if you want. Now when you get more than one window on the screen, you can arrange these however you want. You can manually size them if there's a specific way you want it set. They've got some kind of built-in quick ways to organize them. If you do cascade, it will kind of overlap them. Tile horizontally is probably the one I tend to go to. You can tile vertically. If you've got a wide screen and you want to do a side by side, arrange icons would kind of let you do it in a custom way. You can also close certain windows in here. You can toggle between them. But yeah, those are kind of handy. Yeah, a little bit on the system status tree. This is going to reflect all of the hardware that is in your monitor's zone. I just have one controller, but kind of it reminds me of kind of the way Windows File Explorer is set up, the way you kind of browse through things. It's really no different. It reflects the kind of the topology of the system. We start with the zone that we're viewing, and then it's going to go on the controller level. You expand your controller, you're going to see your readers, and you can expand from there. You would see your auxiliary inputs and outputs that would be associated in a software sense with that reader, and that's really just where they live in system administration. Aux inputs and outputs can be programmed for whatever purpose you need them for. But yeah, on the controller side of things, you're going to see the name. It's going to give you the firmware revision, and then if there are some other options that could show up here. If you go up to the options menu, for instance, you can do display controller capacity or device series. Device series would tell you, is it a series 1, series 2, series 3? It's like, what generation Mercury board is it? Controller capacity will show you the amount of memory that's being used, how many card holders are in there. Yeah, and now we can see for the series, my board here, this is a 1320 board. I've got this aptEQ reader on. It's showing me that it's a series 3B board. If you've got older boards, it will show you that information as well. And you can toggle these on and off as needed. There's a couple other options I like to point out. When you open this up for the first time, one of the things you're going to find is that all these automatic modes are turned on. I'd like to personally turn all those on. Turn them off. I do find them to be kind of obnoxious, but there are some times, for instance, if you're a full-time security person monitoring this system and you've got a dedicated monitor for this, then actually some of these would be advantageous. Maybe you want the automatic card holder display. If the system is configured to trigger the card holder window for a card read, there are some additional options that go along with that, but you would have to have this turned on. If you're using maps where your hardware is dropped onto a floor plan, and you want that to pop up, for certain events, you would need that turned on here. I'm going to highlight this one here, automatic visual notification. This is one of the biggest questions I get during training. And this is turned on by default. Like I said, what this is a feature they call breakthrough. And if you are using your computer for other purposes and you have it open in the background, this one is one of the more annoying features. If you don't want it to override all of your other programs, then turn this feature off, because that's exactly what it does. When you get a high priority event or an alarm that comes through, it will actually force the alarm monitoring program to the foreground of your computer. So if you're typing email or working on something else, boom, all of a sudden alarm monitoring will come forward and override that. So if you want to turn that off, that's how you do it. You click automatic visual notification, so you don't have the check mark there. Some other options that I tend to like to change up here, you have save alarm on exit. That's normally checked by default. And what that does is, as events queue up in the main alarm monitor, it will actually save them in there. So when you close the program, it will save them, and when you open it, it will save them. And if you don't clear those out over time, that actually will drastically slow down the load and close time of the program, because it's having to save those to the local memory of the computer. There's really no reason that you need to save them unless it's just part of your procedure. You don't want to have to run reports, but again, they're being saved to the database anyways. This is really just, do you want them to continually save in the main alarm monitor? So if you don't want that, like me, then you can uncheck that, and when you close the program, it will just discard them from the window. Again, they are still in the database. You're not deleting them from the history. So you can do some other things to tweak, the customization. You can change the font if you want. I always like to display the seconds. Otherwise, for a date timestamp, it's only going to show you the date, and, the hour and the minutes, but it won't show you seconds unless you turn that on. I also prefer the descending date and time. It defaults to ascending, so you can change that if you like. Another thing that I find handy, if you do have a busy system with a lot of things happening and you leave this program open for long periods of time, and you can stack up events quick. There is actually a default limit of 10,000 events. So what happens if you build up 10,000 events, it will actually show you down here in the lower right corner, if you can kind of see where my mouse is hovering, it'll show you the total events. If that climbs to 10,000, it'll actually give you an error window that pops up that'll say, maximum number of events reached, event pulling stopped. It's basically not going to receive anything more at that point. So what you can do is you can just purge all your events. You can click down here in the main alarm monitor. You can go up to edit and delete all. You can select them and you can acknowledge them, and that will address it in real time. If you want a more automatic way to do that, you can, as long as you're clicked on the main alarm monitor, the monitor has to be selected, then you can actually go up to the configure menu and you can choose alarm options, and you can check this box, which is normally off by default, and that will clear alarms automatically. And the default is set to 10,000. I've already changed mine to the lowest value, which is 1,000. So what happens is when you hit that number of events, it will automatically purge events to get it below. I don't know exactly how far down it goes. It has some sort of algorithm it seems to follow, but it will just purge a whole bunch of events and get you down so you've got kind of some more room to start receiving events. So I do recommend that. That's kind of just some of the basics of setting up the program. Some other cool things that people don't often know is if you're in a multi-monitor setup, you can actually undock some of these windows. And you can do that by clicking on the upper left corner, and you can go between standard mode and what they would call floating mode. There's some other options in here too that you can play with. List view. I tend to leave those the same, but yeah, floating mode is kind of handy if you want to be able to drag that off to another monitor. You can do that with any of these. Same with the main alarm monitor. You can put that into floating mode as well, and if you want to put it back, you can put it to standard mode. So that is very handy. Now, a little bit just more on kind of the functionality. We've mostly talked about setting up the program. And I will say, too, when you make these kind of configuration changes, it will actually save it on it's saved on the workstation level, like locally in a configuration file. So if you replace your computer or you completely uninstall the software and reinstall it, you will typically lose all of your configuration and you'll have to do it again. But if you're on the same computer, under the same user, then it will load and it will be set the way that you like it. It is generally set to save settings on exit. You can also save in real time by clicking Save Settings Now. But yeah, normally when you close the program, it'll save any customization that you've done. Now, let's talk a little bit about just a couple things that you can do with the software that are quite handy. Now, there is some overlap. A couple functions that you can do in system administration that they've actually built into here too. One of those things is scheduler. you can get to scheduler from system administration, or you can get to it from here. If you click on this little clock icon on the shortcut bar, then it will pull that up. I don't really have anything in my scheduler, but if I did, you would see it, and you can, it's literally the same scheduler, so you can add stuff, modify stuff. Again, assuming you've got permissions to do such things, then you would be able to do it from there. Another handy thing is reports. You can get to this in the administration menu in system administration application, or if you're already in alarm monitoring, then you can click on it there. And again, you can get to most of these things in either the shortcut bar, or if you're prefer the toolbar drop down menus, you can do that too. Scheduler and reports are right here. So again, if you're familiar with this, I'll do another video soon on running reports, but this is the same screen that you can get to running different kind of reports in system admin. So super handy that you can do that. Now let's talk a little bit about the system status tree. As I said already, what you're looking at here is your controller and your readers. All of this stuff you can interact with in real time. So by right-clicking, you're going to open up a pop-up menu that's going to have different options depending on what you're clicking on. If I'm clicking on the controller, I can do a lot of things. I'm going to talk real quick about a trace function, because trace is one of the most handy things you can do with alarm monitoring, in my opinion. A trace is kind of like a report, but it's done in real time. You can do a live trace or a historical trace. The historical trace would basically be a report, but it's informal in the sense that you cannot export it. You can't run it as a PDF and send it. You can't save it as a document or anything. But if you're just simply trying to look something up real quick, it is by far the easiest way to gather information. You can do a trace by right-clicking. So if I did a trace on the controller, and this is the pop-up menu that you're going to get no matter what you do to run a trace by clicking. It's going to ask you, do you want to do a historical trace or a live trace? There's some filters you can set too. If you wanted to only look at certain types of events associated with them, you can do that. I'm typically just going to do either a historical or a live. Live is great if you're doing some testing or troubleshooting. Then you can just say live trace, and based on whatever you're clicked on, it's going to open a separate pop-up window, and you'll only see live events for that thing. So if you're trying to really target a specific controller or a card reader, this would make it a lot easier, especially on a busy system. So let's say I wanted to let's say I had 20 controllers on this system, and this is a scenario I run into sometimes. If I've got a guy working on one panel, a couple card readers, and we're going through testing stuff, I'll launch a trace just on that controller for live events only. Now I'm only going to see events from that panel in this window, so I can bring that forward and put it on top of everything else, so that's all I'm seeing. Very handy. But as I said, you can do historical events too. Super handy if you want to run a quick report. You can also run on archived records if you're a system that's been up and running for a while and you've got a separate archive database. You can do the same thing with reports, but that's how you go between your live database and your archive database. But if you just simply want to look up something that happened, you can set your date and time filters. And again, I'm clicked on the controller, so you have to remember, if you're doing a controller, it's going to show you everything for that controller. So maybe not always the most useful thing, but it depends what you're looking for. So if I do a historical trace, I haven't had a whole lot going on. This is my demo system, so I did a download earlier, so that's mostly what you're seeing, everything that's happened today. On a normal system with more activity, you'd see access events and things like that. So very handy. While we're talking about the controller, when it comes to troubleshooting, one of the things that I have my customers do sometimes, if there's something weird we're looking at, is how do you kind of reset things? And I would kind of equate this to doing like a Windows reboot. Sometimes the easiest thing to do is to just reset the controller, and we would call that the database download. So that's what, I just going to put the disclaimer out there that if you do a database download, it's kind of like when you reboot your cell phone. So if you're used to getting calls all day long, when you reboot your phone during that boot up phase, you're not going to get any calls until that SIM card is back online and everything's working. The controller in the Lenel world, in I would say most access control systems, is the same way. If you reboot it and during its boot up phase, it's not going to be working in the way it normally does when it's online. So this is not something I would recommend doing during peak hours in your facility, because what happens when you right click and you choose database download, I'm just going to show you. What it's going to do is it's going to reset the panel. So it's actually going to go offline. It's going to essentially download a fresh configuration. So for probably a good minute or two on an average system where there's a good connection between the server and the controller, but it is bandwidth dependent. So if you've got like a regional setup where you've got controllers all over the country and you've got a slow connection, might take 5 minutes, it really varies. But on an average LAN system, I usually tell people a couple minutes tops. So now you can see the panel came back online, it rebooted, it's online, and in this case, it's very small. My demo server is on the same switch as the controller, and there's 4 readers, so there's hardly any data to download. This is atypical in how fast it goes. But I would say that, yeah, if you're troubleshooting a weird problem and things kind of look right, this would be one of the first things I would try if it's practical for you to do without causing more disruption, is to just try a database download. You can do download firmware here, but that is not something the average customer needs to do. It's not a typical troubleshooting thing to do either. Most of the time we only do download firmware when we're doing system upgrades, or there's a bug fix and maybe we're pushing out some new firmware. Even that's pretty rare. Now, once you have events in here, you can actually right-click on events too. You can initiate a trace in the same way. It depends on what you're clicking on. If I'm clicking on a reader, then I can do trace, and it's going to ask me what? It's going to ask me, do you want to trace the controller, the device, or the badge? If it was actually a card swipe, then if you chose badge, it would populate with the window with that badge number already filled in. But in this case, this is not an access, a badge-driven event, so that's why it's not doing it that way. But I could type in a badge number, and I could launch a trace just on a specific badge. Very handy to do sometimes. So again, that badge is kind of universal in the options that pop up once you choose how to do that. And then, but yeah, you can go back as far as your database allows you to, really. So I can go back and it's going to show you down on the bottom obtaining trace history. So if you do have to go back a ways, sometimes it might take a little bit to actually pull all that stuff. And if you pull too much events or too many events, it might actually give you a warning that pops up saying, I forget the exact verbiage on it, but it'll tell you it's more than you can fit in the window. So another key thing is how to interact with card readers. You can interact with these by right-clicking on them in the hardware tree, and then you can go to reader access modes. You can toggle between your different modes simply by doing that. What you need to remember is like kind of manually unlocking a deadbolt mechanically. If you're changing the reader mode, then you need to be making sure that there's either programming in place, like a time zone that's going to set it back at the end of the day, or that you have some sort of reminder set to put it back. Because if I set it to unlocked and that door is not on a schedule, then it is going to stay unlocked until somebody goes back in and sets it that way. So I'm going to go ahead and toggle it back to card only. And yeah, that's one of the main things that you would do. You can also interact with these aux inputs and outputs if you want to activate an output. Same kind of principle, you right click on it and you can go activate. You can activate the output that way and do the reverse by clicking deactivate. You can mask events if you don't want to see, door forced open, door held open, or alarms on an aux input, then you can mask and unmask them. You can bypass if you have intrusion stuff going on. If you want to just momentarily let somebody through the door, you can click this open door command, which is actually a shortcut for it up here on the toolbar. And what that's going to do is it's going to basically do the exact same thing as scanning a valid card. It's going to pulse that door for the strike time, and in this case that's what I just did, but I didn't open the door, so it recognized that and said open door command issued, door not used. You can also interact with these columns by clicking on the column header. You can sort events by clicking on the alarm description. It will group them together. If you had a card event, you could sort by card or priority. Any of these things are sortable. So that's also very handy. I think that's about it. Actually, let's talk about bulk acknowledgement. So when you do get a whole bunch of events that stack up, there's a couple ways you can clear out your window. And this will be the last thing I'll leave you with for today. You can choose to delete them, and that will just literally purge them from the window. However, there are some types of events that won't allow you to do that. If the event itself is programmed to require some sort of acknowledgement or be marked in progress, then you won't be able to delete them. And if you want that feedback, if your guards are required to type something in, then that would be part of your procedures to use the fast group acknowledge instead. And what that does is it pops up a different window that allows you to mark them in progress. So if it's something that's under investigation, some sort of alarm, and you want to get that logged in the system, then you can do it that way. Otherwise, you click acknowledge, and it will be cleared from the screen along with a stamp in the database that it was acknowledged by an operator. And you can do them in bulk. You can simply do the shift click if you want, or if you're clicked in the window, you can go to the edit and click select all, or if you're observing the shortcuts, you can do control F11 and that will select them all as well. And then you can click acknowledge and bulk clear them out that way. However, if you have hundreds of events, that can be kind of time consuming. So, well, I think for today that was a good overview. I'm going to leave you with that. I'll probably do some deeper dives on certain tasks in the future, but for now, just wanted to get kind of a general overview to cover some basic training on how to use this program. So I hope that was helpful. Thanks for tuning in. Have a good day.